President-elect Donald Trump's public enemy number one, Liz Cheney, is now the recipient of the US's second highest civilian award, the Presidential Citizens Medal. The former Wyoming Congresswoman was celebrated yesterday with a warm welcome to the White House and a standing ovation as President Biden handed her the award. Take a look.
Elizabeth L. Cheney, for putting the American people over party.
Cheney received the award for her service in Congress and for her work on the January 6 House Committee. Other recipients included fellow January 6 committee member Representative Benny Thompson, former Senator Chris Dodd, and former Senator Ted Kaufman, among others.
Cheney's award has been less than well received by Republicans, with many accusing her of fueling partisan tensions. Senator John Barrasso on Thursday said that President Biden was, quote, either going to pardon Liz Cheney or give her an award. She doesn't deserve either. She represents partisanship and divisiveness, not Wyoming. Well, Liz Cheney, quite a divisive figure across the spectrum. I should say that I was at that ceremony in the East Room of the White House, and I tweeted my own much more amateur version of the standing ovation for Liz Cheney, and my replies were, as I would have expected, filled with people from a more left-wing perspective, highly upset about the award from a kind of anti-war perspective. You know, Liz Cheney herself is extremely conservative, except for her work on the January 6th committee. She is often derided as a warmonger and all the rest of it. But give us the conservative view.
Yeah, sure. Well, even there's overlap there now too, with Trump Republicans on particularly funding in Ukraine and perhaps for Israel. But I mean, her work on the January 6th committee has been really picked apart by this latest investigation by Barry Loudermilk, which has pointed to some of the issues that they specifically ignored because the Republican view or the conservative view would be that Liz Cheney and the J6 committee were single-handedly or singularly focused on sort of getting Trump and not talking about the larger issues that led to January 6th happening in the first place. They were accused of hiding evidence of Trump's request for 10,000 National Guard troops at the Capitol that day. They produced this ABC primetime miniseries and hired TV producers to sort of run the hearings to make them fit for television. They were accused of destroying documents as soon as the committee wrapped. They did not apparently find out that the FBI had 26 informants in the crowd that day. And she's also been accused of witness tampering, accusing Cassidy Hutchinson of talking to her without a lawyer ahead of her making these sort of bombastic claims about Trump allegedly grabbing the wheel of the beast to take himself to the Capitol. So the idea that she put sort of country over party I think is a bit of a manipulation of the facts. I would say that she put self over party.
So I've been scribbling furiously.
I know, sorry.
No, not at all. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I do have a different view, as you might expect, of the January the 6th committee work. Now, the accusation of witness tampering I found very unpersuasive. It was essentially Cassidy Hutchinson wanting a different lawyer or wanting to move away from a lawyer who was being paid, if I recall correctly, by a Trump PAC. And she was sent a list of lawyers. She wasn't like directed to Liz Cheney's personal lawyer or something.
Right,
and I didn't see any evidence that there was a push for Cassidy Hutchinson to testify about anything that she didn't believe to be true.
There was a text between Cassidy Hutchinson and Alyssa Farah, who's now at The View and also left the Trump administration, where she says to Cassidy that she could connect her with Liz Cheney, but that they would need to speak without her lawyer present, which I think is where that accusation comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, I can't now remember every specific text, but my reaction when I read the Loudermilk kind of report into it was that they were being a bit hyperbolic in suggesting that it was actual witness tampering. Now, in relation to things like the TV producers, you can like it or you can dislike it, but I just think that's the modern age. People are wanting the events of the January the 6th committee to make an impact, to have an impact in a media age where you're always competing for attention. And so I don't necessarily think that there's anything nefarious in that. In relation to one of the other points that you made that I scrolled down, which was the destruction of evidence, as I understand it, Loudermilk's complaint was the unedited video was not made available, but the unedited transcripts were made available. So do you see more, I guess you see more by a video, but the idea that it's some malevolent concealment of information seems a bit of a stretch to me.
But shouldn't they keep everything regardless of whether or not they think it's important?
I don't think that that is a bad thing to hold on to everything, but I think that suggesting that it is scandalous to be provided with transcripts rather than video recordings is a bit much.
The other two things I mentioned, I know I was going fast, but they did hide evidence of Trump's push for 10,000 National Guardsmen to be at the Capitol that day, or at least did not release it as part of their report. And they also didn't catch the FBI having 26 informants on the ground that day. And whether or not you view either of those things significant to Trump's culpability or the potential for the FBI to have stopped the event prior to it happening, those seem like relevant pieces of information where if you're trying to prevent a J6 from happening again, you should have investigated and released in your report. And the question is, why did they do that, if not to perhaps try to make Trump look like the aggressor?
I think that the FBI point I would largely agree with you on. I mean, I find it one of the peculiar developments of recent years that the left or liberals have become so reflexively defensive of the FBI and other law enforcement agencies. And I do think it is relevant that there were informants on the ground. Now, I think you and I actually had a discussion when that finding did first emerge about the fact that the suggestion from the most pro-Trump forces was that it was a kind of false flag operation or somebody had incited the crowd, and that was not borne out, in fact, if I recall the findings correctly. Look, I think there are valid criticisms to be made of January the 6th. I think that the chief culprit in what happened on January the 6th is the man who's now President-elect of the United States, because he continually reiterated these false claims of election fraud and incited people to protest those and did not call for them to go home when it was clearly a violent situation.
Well, I did say peacefully and patriotically, but we'll agree to disagree on that one. We have to wrap it. Let's do one final point for the sake of debate. One of the other problems that I had from the January 6th committee from the jump was that Republicans were not allowed to appoint their own choices to the committee, that Nancy Pelosi had this full veto power. Do you think that the committee would have been better served if they had had their first pick from the Republican side to serve on that committee and perhaps investigate some of these other threads unrelated to Trump that were interesting, related to the security of the Capitol and the National Guardsmen and things like that? I
think that if there was a good faith effort to investigate January the 6th by members of both parties, that would be beneficial. I think the problem or the danger was the idea that pro-Trump Republicans would be acting simply to thwart an investigation rather than to look at other additional threads within it.
All right, we're going to leave it there. We have a lot more to cover on Rising. Stick around.